Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome members, officers, and members of the public watching at home to this Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. This committee plays an important role in the overall governance of the Council. Good governance has many benefits, including helping the Council to make effective decisions, improve performance, and be able to respond to risks and opportunities. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work. Chanel.
If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. Please wait for the chair's invitation before you begin. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we begin the meeting? Thank you. I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Terry Tyler, and Councillor Tamsin Thomas is running a little bit late. Any further apologies at all? Okay. Minutes, 8th of November 2023. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2023. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tandy, thank you. Are there any comments at all in the minutes? Could go to the vote, please.
Chair, that vote is carried.
Thank you. Notification of other business. There has been no other business notified tonight. Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded and the recordings will be available to view on ModGov or via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and, wherever possible, leave at an appropriate point in proceedings. Public participation. We have no public participation this evening. Item number 6, SAF's progress update on the 2023-24 anti-fraud plan. Hand over to Nick Jennings to present.
Good evening, Chair and members. Yes, my report is an update on delivery with the anti-fraud plan that was agreed by this committee in March of this year. The plan itself can be found at Appendix A of your bundles. And Appendix B is the progress with the Shared Anti-Fraud Services KPIs and performance against those KPIs. And if I could just draw members' attentions first to that particular document. This is on page 29 of your bundles. I just wanted to highlight KPI 2A, where there was an agreed number of operational days as part of the service plan for North Herts Council this year to be delivered by the Anti-Fraud Service. The report before members is mainly covering our work up until the end of October, so the first 2 quarters of the year into the third quarter, and just to give members an indication that although we weren't on target, certainly towards the end of October, with delivering the planned 285 days, we're only at 102 days, which is 36%. There has been more work undertaken across the authority in the third quarter, and there were some issues with us being able to record accurately the number of days that we were undertaking for all of our partners, because we'd changed our case management system in April of this year, and that case management system struggled, along with us, to accurately record our time. So I just wanted to provide members with assurance that although we might be short on the number of days we're able to report this year for the council, we have been working and we have been delivering the plan that was agreed. So the reporting might be slightly short, but certainly for the third quarter onwards, we anticipate that we will be recording the agreed number of days in each quarter. So just to provide assurance on that. Just take members back to the main body of the report. As I said, the plan was agreed by members in March this year and agreed with officers prior to that. And just picking out some highlights and some items to update members on since the report was produced. Just at section 10 on page 14, we mentioned there the activity that was undertaken in November around International Fraud Awareness Week. It's where we work with all of our partners' communication teams to push out messages to encourage staff and the public to protect themselves against fraud and the impact of fraud on the council as well, where that occurs, to discourage that activity. Just moving over onto page 15, page 12, we mentioned there that we're working with the council's HR team at the moment to look at the training package, the iLearning training package that the council has in place for officers and members. There may be some changes to that later this year or indeed next year. So we're working closely to ensure that any training that's delivered meets the requirements for the authority. Just again, picking up on page 15, counter-fraud activity, we mentioned there the number of referrals or allegations of fraud that have been received from staff or members of the public that have been reported to the Shared Anti-Fraud Service for investigation. It's important to remember at this point that these are allegations. They're not proven cases of fraud. They are suspicions and they will require investigation of some sort. And we just carry on through the report to mention that the investigations that have been conducted and the outcomes, the value of potential fraud in investigations that are live at present, and the value of fraud that's actually been reported are in sections 15 and 16 of the report itself. We mention a particular case on page 16 about grant fraud investigations. This related to Mr. Ando Wilson, who was involved in a fraud against the authority by making false claims for grants. Mr. Ando Wilson pleaded guilty at a hearing in November and was actually sentenced on the 1st of December. And he received a 2-year suspended prison sentence and an additional 200 hours of unpaid work. And there will be further hearings in 2024 around proceeds of crime for us to recover the money that Mr. Ando Wilson obtained and return that either to Bays or to other victims of his crime. So that's a very positive outcome for the council. We mentioned at the bottom of page 16, quite an important report that came out in April this year about Lost Homes, Lost Hope. It's produced by the Fraud Advisory Panel. And it picks up again on the risk of fraud around social housing. So the misuse of social housing stock and why that's important, particularly to a local authority that doesn't have a stock of its own. It's important that we work with our housing providers, Settle and others, to ensure that they're preventing fraud and making sure their stock is available to people from the council's housing register. So that's a particularly important report that came out early this year. We just move on page 17 to talk about some of the proactive and prevention activity. SAFS continues to work with a number of agencies and organisations nationally, regionally and locally to make sure we're up to speed with the latest fraud threats. We also mentioned at section 24 that the District Council took part in the County Council funded council tax framework this year. That pilot project has just closed. We've received a report from the provider for that work. They undertook a review of 18,000 discounts that were in payment across the district. Just over 3,500 of those were selected for a review, and 625 of those discounts were removed as a result of that work. That's delivered an extra £264,000 of council tax for collection this year. So a very successful outcome for the council and provided at the cost of the county council, so free to North Herts. We talk about the National Fraud Initiative. Again, this is really important work that we're undertaking around the use of data and data analytics to identify and prevent fraud. So we talk about the national exercise and the work that's been undertaken. It's been excellent work at North Herts. The number of matches that have come out of the national exercise is very low in comparison to other district councils that we work with. And the review, the number of cases that have actually been selected for review is very good as well. And the return for the authority of around £69,000 in saving is a positive outcome. We also work very closely with the council's involvement with the Hertfordshire Fraud Hub to ensure that data is submitted into Fraud Hub on a frequent basis. And that allows us, again, to identify and prevent fraud early on. And there's been a number of cases so far this year already identified, and a significant number of reviews that are still underway at present. And then just finally, at the end of the report, we mentioned the what we term executive reports or fraud risk assessments that have been provided either directly to North Herts Council or indirectly to the council following reviews at other authorities. These have included work around polygamous workers. So this is a new term that we've come across. This is employees who are working for more than one authority or organisation at the same time, usually through agencies or some consultancy. So it's certainly a new risk that we've seen following the pandemic and changes to working practices where people are more remote working than they were previously. And then we've produced some specific reports for North Herts Council around the grants process and its recruitment risks as well. Chair, happy to take questions at that point.
Thank you very much, Nick. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Hone.
I'll just find the place on the where you said somewhere in here that you. Sorry, you said somewhere that you're a bit behind on investigation. I'm trying to find now where the number of days that you had done, and you had because your system problems amongst other things. I'll find. I think it was on page 2930. Was it 30? And you said that that there was a shortfall number of days that you've worked in certain areas. Do you expect to get to the agreed number, 385, I think was the number mentioned, by the end of the year? Or do you think there'll still be a shortfall by the end of the year?
I anticipate we won't achieve the target of 285 that we set at the beginning of the year in recorded days. I think it's important to note that we were working, we just weren't recording that work properly on the case management system. Or the case management system wasn't able to capture all the work that we were undertaking. So no, we won't achieve the target. I've spoken to Ian about that. But as I said earlier, members should be assured that we were undertaking the work, we just weren't recording it accurately.
So you are therefore saying there is no risk that things have happened which you would have normally picked up if you'd been done the 285 days versus what number of days which you expect to achieve?
I'm satisfied that we've undertaken the work that we planned to do for the authority, and that any risk that was there, we've dealt with as part of the work that we planned.
Any further questions? Councillor Plater.
Yeah, again, just on that page 30 as well. Obviously, it seems as though you've had some issues across the case management system. Are these now fully resolved? Are the issues that are detailed on this report now fully resolved? Obviously, the one that we've just talked about, and the management system being unable to recognise urgent from non-urgent cases as well.
The second part isn't resolved. We're working with our provider on that, so that isn't resolved. But we've two targets for dealing with referrals as they're received into the service. One is to deal with urgent referrals within 24 hours. The other is to deal with all other referrals within 2 days. At present, we're hitting the 2 days target. In fact, we're below the 2 days target on that. And anything that comes in that's determined as high risk, high priority, it is picked out and is dealt with urgently. Going back to the number of days in the CMS, the case management system has been updated. It is recording our time accurately now. Moving over to the new case management system presented a number of issues for us back in April. One of them was the system itself understanding how we wanted to record time, and the team understanding how they use the case management system to record time. Both of those has been dealt with, so we're dealing with it from both ends. And we are now receiving a weekly report that tells us how much time has been allocated to each officer across each partner. So we've got that granular detail, so we're able to identify where there are gaps.
Just to addendum on that, on the first point, then, do you have an ETA with the provider as to when you're going to be able, when that functionality to record urgent and non-urgent cases will be live for you? And is there a plan in place, or is there a plan needed, do you think, to go back and mark cases where they come in as urgent and non-urgent on the case management system, so that you can see that the historical data from that?
I don't know that we'll be able to do it with the historical data. As I say, we are able to identify as cases come into us, we're able to identify through the sifting process that we apply to all cases that are reported to us. We're able to identify high priority, high risk cases, and they're sifted in a completely different way. So I'm happy they're being dealt with. Going back to the provider, we've got a meeting with them tomorrow. It's on their list of development, but they provide the service to around 120 organisations. So it has to be something that reaches the threshold where they're going to do that because there's enough customers that require it. So yes, we're pushing, but I think the authority can be confident that we're able to manage the workflow that's coming into us, identify those high risk cases, pull them out and deal with them appropriately. So we can't record it, we can't report it at the moment in a way that I'd like us to be able to. But again, I'm confident that we're turning around allegations swiftly enough that they'll be swept up within that work anyway.
One last. Do you have a contingency plan or a backup plan for if the case management system provider decides that they're not going to put that functionality onto the system to record those?
Yeah, the intention would be that if they're not able to update their system to reflect the different type of cases that are coming through to us for investigation, that we will have to put something in place as part of the sifting process. So as part of that process, we identify them and able to report them. What I don't want us to do is to use a system that sits outside of the case management. We work for 8 authorities. We've got to make sure the case management system works for all of those authorities in the same way. And where we create different processes or data sets outside of our case management system, that's got the potential to go wrong. So we want to keep as much control as we can within the case management system itself. Again, as I say, because we've got a process of dealing with work as it comes in, I'm confident that we are dealing with those urgent cases quickly. Okay.
John Cannon.
Thank you, Chair. Just interested in the case study about the grant fraud investigation on page 16, your page 6. Just we've got the outcome of the investigation with the court case and the suspended sentence. Just at the other end of the chain, wondered what it means for the root cause in grant processes and HR processes. I had thought this related to dual working. It was working for a garden centre and the town centre manager and did a grant fraud. So there's 3 things going on there.
Mr. Ando Wilson was actually working for the Business Improvement District, so the BID, and that's where the offending was occurring whilst he was employed in that particular role. It wasn't a multiple employment; it was just working in that role. We've provided a report to officers which highlights how that fraud occurred, how it manifested itself, and some recommendations about how we can prevent that happening in future. Unfortunately, with this type of fraud, with an insider fraud, it's very, very difficult to prevent because people have access to data and systems. When they're inside the system, it's much harder to detect that fraud occurring. This fraud was identified as a result of work that officers undertook. So the work that we've been providing to the authority, and again, we've mentioned this at previous meetings with Ian, the authority paid out tens of thousands of grants from 2020 through to 2022. For millions and millions of pounds, and we put in place some very good measures at the authority, working with the officers to make sure that we prevented fraud occurring. This gentleman was able to get around that because of the position he was in working for the BID, but we still identified the fraud later on. So we're able to identify the fraud occurred through the assurance work that we were doing post payment. So yeah, the money had gone, it left the accounts, and it's not something we're happy about. But we did detect it as part of the post payment work that we were doing, and we're able to investigate that. And obviously, we'll now seek to recover the money from that gentleman.
Thank you. Just one follow on then, please. Is it a typo where it says Letchworth Garden Centre? Because that threw me. Does it mean Letchworth Garden City? Ah, that's
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
so it is just grants.
yeah,
It
it is grants.
It's confined to grants.
Yes, yeah, very much.
Thank you. And what was the value of the fraud, please?
£64,000, I think, in total. Over a couple of months.
Months. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions at all from the committee? Okay. Thank you very much, Nick, for the presentation and answering the questions. So the recommendation is that the committee notes the work of the council and the shared anti-fraud service in delivering the 2023-24 anti-fraud plan. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Plater. And a seconder, Councillor Hone. Thank you very much. Is there any debate? Not seeing anything. In which case, then, can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Nick, if you wish to depart, then please do so.
Thank you
very much. Move on to item 7 now. It's the mid-year report on risk management governance. It's Ian Cooper to present.
Thank you, Chair. The start of the report begins with the context of why you're getting this report. As hopefully all of you, okay. Hopefully all of you are aware by now that we've changed the process for performance, risk, and performance indicator reporting. So it goes into the council delivery plan, which goes through to overview and scrutiny committee, but obviously important for a audit committee to have an understanding of risk. So we have the end of year and mid-year reports on risk management, which is what this report is covering. It covers quite a breadth of subjects. So I'll just do a brief introduction to the report and obviously welcome any questions. It is a report both for this committee and for also for recommending on to cabinet for them to also have a oversight of risk. But the role of this committee here is to kind of comment and provide any insights they wish to provide onwards. So starts off by looking at what risk management is about and why it's important. That's covered in section 8.1 and the governance of agents in relation to risk. It then goes through kind of some of the histories I sort of briefly mentioned, but then on page 34, we've got the kind of current situation with the corporate risks in the council delivery plan set out on the matrix there, and also the table below that, table 1 at the bottom of that page, and going on to the next page sets out the movements in risks over the kind of 6-month period we're looking at. So looking at the 1st of April through to the end of September, which is important in showing that we are looking at risks on a regular basis. They're not static risks, and they are being reviewed. And that's also confirmed in 8.4, where it talks about the stages of risks in terms of the actual reviews of injury risks and how we're doing against the timelines that are supposed to be in place for those risks. 8.5 is around new, emerging, and archive risks. We've got 2 risks there: the Baldock Industrial Estate fire. The fire happened, but then we were looking at the risks around the aftermath of that, the recovery from that, and the reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete risk obviously arose from the issues more widely, particularly in schools. We have now reviewed all of our high-risk buildings or higher risk buildings, remember actually that high risk, and have done almost all of the other buildings as well, and we have not found any RARC in those buildings. So that's some effective work there, and hopefully we can close that risk down fairly soon in relation to that. It did also give us a good understanding of the structure of lots of buildings anyway, which is quite nice in terms of being able to understand the roof structures of our buildings and being able to record those in our asset management system, which is good. The other thing that is picked out in this report is I'm going to focus on is the cyber support into risk management. So that's covered in section 9. As you'll see in the appendix, pretty much all of those actions have now been completed. The only one outstanding was in relation to the information on the intranet. We are imminently next week about to launch SharePoint for our new intranet system, and then that will complete that action there. So pretty much all the content's written, just doing the final bits of testing on that to make sure it's all in the right order, in the right place. But yeah, we'd already done work on the actual current intranet as well. There's also mentioned in the report, and this did come out in the audit as well, around making sure we do some look at horizon scanning. And we did that work with our senior management group actually yesterday. We did a little session there around that, which is quite useful, which is trying to pick out kind of the risks and opportunities we're facing in the medium to long term. Quite a wide variety of feedback. Some of it's picking up on risks that are already in the risk register. So lots about resourcing risks, looking at the current situation where we are struggling to recruit and retain staff, but also looking at where we do have kind of existing staff, some of which may be kind of at the older end of the demographic, and looking at the prospect they might retire at some point. And therefore, actually, if we're already struggling and then that happens as well, how do we actually think about that in terms of our resourcing and the need for action there? Political risk, probably sort of fairly short term actually at the moment in terms of both elections at the district council, national elections, and thinking about the implications they could have on us in terms of all sorts of things, legislation, funding, etc. Picked out things around IT risks and cybersecurity. I think it's always going to be a big risk for us and for all organisations, around making sure that our data is secure, our systems are secure. And that kind of feeds into the bit around business continuity in section 10, where we're looking at how we manage in various scenarios, one of which could be some form of cyber attack, which took out our IT systems, and what takes priority around that recovery, and how we manage with more manual systems in the short term. So that's ongoing at the moment in terms of making sure all our service plans in that regard are up to date. Going back to kind of that session at senior management group, also looked at things like Churchgate as kind of being an opportunity going forward, but also a risk in terms of how we deliver that. The implications of the local plan and growth in the district around what the district will look like in the future with housing growth, and how we kind of do our best to kind of manage that and to shape the district we want it to be, as well as the implications for our services going forward. You know, what's the implications of all that growth on the services we deliver, as well as think about our funding as well. Council tax growth will occur with that level of growth as well. I've briefly covered on to section 10. So I think that probably is all the sections I wanted to cover in the report. But obviously, given the breadth of it, haven't covered everything. So welcome questions where you want to dig into more detail.
Thank you very much, Ian. Do we have any questions from the committee? Councillor Thomas.
Hi, Ian. I just wanted to ask if the if Berrymead had been included in the RAC assessment.
Yes, we went around all our buildings, including leisure centres, sort of buildings we don't actually operate day to day, operated by our partners. So we've done all the buildings that are on our list of buildings.
Councillor Hone.
Thank you, Chair. Did you mention, was it SharePoint or Agenda Scope that you mentioned that we were looking at?
It's SharePoint.
And what impact would that have on us simple elected representatives in terms of data that we need to have access to, and particularly communication we need to have access to?
So it replaced our intranet. So we'll obviously send out guidance to council as well, where you access the internet, although I think most of the information you access is for other means. And we are looking more widely going forward around the sort of the council support on those kind of systems as well. But at this point, it's mainly internet, which is mainly staff focused, but we'll obviously make sure that councils are aware of what's going on too, to the way you are accessing it, because I know that we kind of give you links to things like our risk register, which is via the internet. So we'll make sure we update you well to make sure you can access those too. But it will be on your laptops and available to you.
Follow up on that, yeah. And that'll be on the new laptops, which we're investigating at the moment.
That will be accessible through whatever devices you have across devices. It will be as accessible as the current internet.
There's no risk on the current ones per se, which will anyway be built into the new ones when we distribute those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, just looking at the section 8.4 review of risks, I note that it says that 26% of reviews were completed more than 1 month late. That seems like quite a chunk without any sort of end time zone. I was just wondering if you could sort of give an idea of how many of those were completed within 2 months, 3 months. What sort of drift do you think is inside that figure?
So we've got, yeah, I haven't got the details to hand, but I'll certainly look into what that kind of total drift has been. Given that they have now would have been now be completed, it can't have been too long after the period they should have been deleted in, but I'll look into provide more detail around that kind of drift in future reports. And also, obviously, our ambition will be to get that down in terms of having less drift on that. Obviously, we should try and get them done within the timescales we set. Our focus is generally on the corporate risks, but we should still be mindful of the service risks as well, because they can become corporate risks and can become big and important if we don't keep an eye on them.
John Cannon.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, please. Different topics. First one's Churchgate. The scoring has come down to 8 from 9. Just wondered if you could say a little bit more about what's driven that movement. And on the risk definition itself, the risk is about the project and delivery. There's nothing in the risk about deterioration of the centre meanwhile, the cost to carry, the maintenance. Wondered if you could elaborate on that, please. And the second one was the waste scheme, moving to 3 weekly collections. Remind me, has the community impact of that stretched period been assessed? Can people store their waste in between the 3 weekly collections, please?
I'm struggling to remember the exact reasons for the change in the Churchgate scoring. I mean, the project is moving forward, and we're going through the process of it, which would help with the risk score of what was going on. I would have to go to talk to the relevant service director and service manager to get a full explanation of the risk score movements to support that. In terms of the condition of the centre itself, we did get condition reports when we bought the centre and are looking at those. And we have got a plan in mind for what the sort of the shorter term work is we're doing in the centre that we needed before we get to any potential regeneration opportunity. But if that does drift, there will be an increasing risk there. I can't remember if we've got a service risk in there about that, but I'll certainly talk to about where we need one in there to sort of cover the kind of the potential impact of that, and making sure those kind of works happen. And your last question was about the 3 week waste, and probably drifting into revenue scrutiny there in terms of the scrutiny of that kind of decision. But yes, it was looked at as part of that report that we took to both Cabinet and revenue scrutiny around the overall capacity of bins, and how they were being used, and also resident feedback as part of that decision. So yeah, there was that analysis in there. Obviously, it will affect some people, but overall, we felt that the impact was manageable, and it helps to encourage recycling, which is a big ambition of what we want to achieve, because there's still lots of capacity in the other bins to be used.
Councillor Plater.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to touch on 8.6.4, where it says that you actively manage and monitor risks, scoring 4 or higher on the risk matrix. Would you be able to delve into a little bit on how these are monitored, whether that's on a day-to-day basis or how they're monitored project by project, and whether that then impacts the amount of time between the risk, potentially you looking at the different risk levels and the risk levels changing on these reports? Would they all change at the same time, or would they be changing independently of each other at different times throughout the life of this report?
Yeah, each of the risk managers, which is generally the service manager or service director, responsible for delivering, usually linked to projects, these risks, because of the way they perform for the council delivery plan, will be obviously managing that project on a regular basis and doing their regular risk reviews. those risk reviews are for different times for different risks and different projects because they'll be on a cycle. I've got a risk officer who supports with the risk reviews. They can't do them all at exactly the same time. So yeah, we do spread them around a bit. So we make sure they're all done on a cyclical basis. But yes, they will all be at different trigger points, and the system monitors those trigger points to make sure those risk reviews are taking place as they're supposed to.
And I'm guessing then that cyclical basis then speeds up for those that are higher than 4 and is slower for those that the council deems less of a risk. Is that correct?
Yeah, as set out, I can't remember which paragraphs in, there's sort of various frequencies from sort of 3 months to a year, depending on what's going on. There's nothing to stop a risk being reviewed more regular than that. And obviously, if there was a big change in the risk, we'd expect the manager to review it more regular than that. Where there is a project board in place or a project specification in place and that process being gone through, there'd be a risk log attached to the actual project itself, which goes into even more detail. So that gives you the more granular detail for that risk and projects to look into.
Thank you all. Can't see any further questions at this point. So the recommendations are that Finance, Audit and Risk Committee note and provide comments to Cabinet on the mid-year risk management governance update, including progress made with completion of audit recommendations. That Finance, Audit and Risk Committee comment on the type of risk management training they would like to receive going forward. That Finance, Audit and Risk Committee note the review of the Performance and Risk Management Group terms of reference. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Plater, thank you. And a seconder. I think Councillor Hone, you just about got that one there. Move on to debate. Is there any debate from the committee at all? Councillor Plater?
Yeah, only just very quickly to say inside the recommendation 2.2, talking about the type of risk management training, is there something specific in there that councillors are seeing, or anything that we want to add to that, I guess, at this point? Sorry, I should have brought that up earlier, but I thought I'd use this just to put the point forward. If not, then happy to go forward as written.
I think as has happened in the past, we've looked regularly at the type of training that we would like provided. It's something we've asked a few times. I know Ian, among others, has been generous with his time in trying to provide some of that prior to meetings usually. I think it's more of a general point again to all members. If there are specific areas, particularly in this case, obviously around the risk management side, they feel they'd like a bit more either the detail in the process or understanding of how that works. Again, it's anything we can take forward, not just for us as committee, but for councillors on the whole to understand, obviously, the risk that we're managing as councillors. So again, if it's any suggestions really that members have that like to put forward. Councillor Hone.
Thank you, Chair. On the same subject at 2.2, I guess the only thing I can think of that we might benefit from is understanding exactly how risks are assessed, and why they are in the various states that we put them in that boxes as high, low, medium, etc., etc. So how that calculation is made, and perhaps better understanding of that might be helpful if we wanted something training around risk management.
Absolutely. Ian, I think you've something to say there.
I'll do my usual plug for the risk and opportunity, risk and performance management group. That group, we do discuss a risk, at least one risk in detail at each meeting, which does include looking at why it's scoring what it's scoring. So I will plug that, and for that, I appreciate you in the day. I may not be able for everyone to attend it, but I will plug it and say it's there. But equally happy to do something more kind of, I guess, theoretical, maybe drawing on some examples, to kind of do that as a sort of little training session for this group and maybe more widely. If that's something you want me to do, happy to do that as well. But a lot of it does come out in the kind of the actual applying it in practice, because it is judgment. It does require some subjectivity in it, but yeah, I can certainly go through that as a training session.
I think given the topic today, that'd probably be quite a welcome one to do in the future if you'd be happy to run that for us. And again, I'd probably recommend that to members beyond just the committee here, because it is clearly something that affects all across the council. Councillor Hone, are you content with the answers provided? That's great, thank you. Any more debate at all from the committee? If not, then can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 8, second quarter revenue budget monitoring 2023-24. Ian Cooper to present.
Thank you, James. Running through my reports to get past the risk report to get to the next one. And then I'll kick off. It's the same format as normal for the revenue monitor report. This is obviously the end of the second quarter. So as at the end of September, albeit we do generally include stuff that happens after that to give it as most current position as we can about what's going on. So I'll just pick out a few of the key topics in the report and then as ever seek any questions you may have. Table 3 starting on page 87 details the major movements in variances during the last quarter. At the top there, which we'll probably cover in more detail on net support, is the treasury management income. Again, as we're continuing to have higher interest rates than we're forecasting and staying high for longer, and slippage in our capital budgets means we've got more money to invest, and therefore our investment returns are significantly higher than what we're forecasting at the start of the year. Then various other bits to pick out. I think the most major one sort of flag amongst it. There's obviously quite a few on there where we've got carried forward a budget request into next year. So we've got projects that are kind of one-off in nature but have slipped, usually due to resourcing, looking at them moving that budget into next year to deliver those projects then. But there's a few areas where we've got estimated impacts moving into next year. So some around the waste area. So we've got a sort of slight drop in the income from trade waste and a drop in income from sale of paper materials. Paper materials is very volatile, as is all materials for sold for recycling. Very volatile, and so is the volume side of that as well. It is sort of dropping over time, just never quite sure how quickly it's going to drop. But the big one in there is around the parking. This kind of reflects back on the challenge that came out of the medium-term financial strategy. In that report, we kind of said that looking like probably worth just highlighting parking as a risk at the moment. But on further review, having another look at the latest data, the recovery is just so slow in terms of going back to the pre-COVID levels, particularly on the long stay side and the season tickets. Sales on those continue to be low, which obviously, I guess, resembles the fact that people are not returning to long stay parking and sort of ongoing long stay parking. Maybe offices aren't having everyone go back to the office and therefore don't need the season tickets. So that is definitely a drop there. So we're reporting that both in this year and an ongoing issue. Continues to flag really issue this year, but flagging for future years around the general pay-as-use income. It is still returning to higher. It's still going up slowly, but very, very slowly. So at the moment, keeping the budget as it is for next year going forward, but there is a risk there in terms of that recovery and how quickly we proceed with that. And then also linked to all that, we've got the ongoing pressure around card payment transactions. This isn't just all in this year, this movement. It's just kind of got lost a bit in the sort of the post-COVID recovery and kind of the various bits that have been going on with parking in that intervening period. This sort of probably reflects a trajectory over quite a few years, really. This pressure that's emerging here is that, you know, we are getting more card payments. There are fees associated with that compared to cash, albeit if you know, there are less risks with car payments than cash, but there are fees that you have to pay linked to it. So, yeah, that's in there as an ongoing pressure. There's going to be income we have to pass on to process those transactions. Then we go through into sort of the page 94 onwards, and that indicates on income. I think a lot of it reflects what we've either discussed before at the committee or I've just sort of previously discussed higher at the report, in that we've got garden waste being quite positive in terms of income, and penalty charge notices are in line with budget. But the other areas are either red or at risk of being red. So we've got the commercial waste as a red risk, albeit quite low in terms of actual impact at the moment. Car parking we've discussed just previously, and plenty of applications are amber on the basis that they may come in on budget, but they are kind of a little bit dependent on some of the bigger applications coming in. Our actual kind of the accumulation of all the little planning applications where people are doing sort of changes to their homes have dropped off, and that's linked to, I guess, the kind of economic conditions we're faced at the moment, and the economic conditions that households face in terms of what they can do on their homes. So that's where we are with those. And then we've got the sort of stats that support that in table 5 in paragraph 8.10. And then we then work through the various bits around where we are against the contingency for COVID we set at the start of the year, which is in paragraph 8.18, looking like we've released some of that contingency, but then use that against some of the areas we have had overspends. And then we've got the projected general fund balance at the end of the year in table 7, which I guess is positive in terms of it's higher than it was, but most of that treasury returns, which will at some point fall away and fade away. So it's nice to have it there as a protection for the future and looking forward. But we've sort of seen how the ongoing budget challenges that are emerging through this process will then feed into the budget process going forward as well. So there still needs to look at what we're spending going forward and our income going forward. So the sort of short-term sticking plaster, I guess I'd say, is the kind of treasury income at the moment. That was what I was going to cover in introducing the report. Welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have any questions from the committee? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, it's clear that the impact of staff shortages and resourcing generally is having quite impact on the pace at which a number of projects are going ahead. Are we able to get line of sight on which specific areas are suffering? I mean, it seems lots of areas are suffering from hiring, but I know that sort of obviously in the marketplace, different skills get compensated differently. We're probably working on I'm assuming we're working on a fairly fixed pay scale. And I think given how many projects seem to be impacted, it would be good to get more line of sight on specific areas and where there's specific variance from what market rates are for various jobs, because it seems that the impact to service delivery is really quite significant over a number of areas. And it would be good to see, rather than sort of general comments on resourcing challenges, to try and get some more granularity in our understanding of specifically where those risks are and why.
So in terms of detail, I'd say the risk areas mostly where we've got recruitment issues at the moment are legal, estates. We've had trouble with. We've got some progress there recently, but still understaffed in that area, and they're therefore a backlog. Planning, environmental health are the principal areas we're having trouble with recruitment to. But it is a more general picture as well in terms of we are struggling to keep track with particular areas where we can having to compete with the private sector, where there's transferable skills in the public sector and private sector. We do offer things like incentives, so we offer for sort of hard to fill posts and sort of short-term sort of golden hello payments and those kind of things with a bit of retention period in them. But it is a struggle to get people who want to work for the amounts we can afford to pay.
Is it that there's just a shortage of those roles in the marketplace, and we might want to be looking at, I don't know, visa issuances and things like that, or is it just salaries, and the salaries aren't at the standard they need to be for those roles?
I mean, other authorities are having similar problems with those kind of roles and in other roles as well. So we've been fairly okay on things like finance and accountancy, but other authorities are having a problem with those kind of staff, and there's been surveys around that area as well as many other areas. It is yeah, as I say, it's the areas where you are competing in the private sector. So there are people out there. It's just they don't want to do the work for local government salaries. And I guess overall, there you could say therefore an unsupply, and therefore we do look at things like apprenticeships as a way of growing our own in certain areas to try and get kind of people at the bottom, train them up, and then hope they move into some of those roles later on. But there is a limit to how much capacity you can apply to that in terms of, there's the obviously required training, and the job needs to try and be done in the meantime. So it's a tough ask, but we're trying little things to try and improve it, as well as making ourselves trying to, whilst we can't improve the monetary package, looking at other things we can do about our employment package to kind of make it look more attractive in the marketplace.
Councillor Hone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I can, please. Painting obvious when we came to forecasting income from recycling, that we're a little bit out on this in terms of we haven't achieved what we expected to achieve in terms of income, and also in terms of collection. It says here, I'm wondering if that might be impacted sometime in the future if we decide to go to a different supplier of that service, or if we go to a different methodology in terms of the times of which or dates which we collect these goodies. So that could have an impact on those numbers, couldn't it? But I'll raise that somewhere else. Postage costs. That's a 30% increase. How did we underestimate it, and what's going out first class now that wasn't going out before?
I'd have to come back to the detail of that. I haven't got that to hand in terms of what exactly what's going out first class. But yeah, I'll look into that and get some answers to you.
If you could, please. And also, did it include the distribution of the recently received publication from North Arts Council, which went through the doors of, I think, of residents? Is that including postage, or is that somewhere else in the budget?
The Outlook magazine is separate to that.
And therefore, it wasn't posted and delivered.
No, that's delivered by.
That's a different budget, yeah.
Yeah, that is.
And I'm assuming that budget was on target then, and we planned for that. Okay, thank you for that, Chair. I think we're vulnerable around recycling.
Thank you, Councillor Hone. Councillor Plater.
Yeah, just to follow on from Councillor Thomas's point on staffing issues, I guess at what point do we look and see that we're not getting the people in that we need to get in for the salaries that we're offering, and initiate a discussion about pay points and how and increasing those salaries to attract candidates into those jobs? And I understand the financial pressure on councils and on local government at the moment, and the ability to pay salaries, higher salaries, is impacted by those financial pressures. But it seems to be almost a chicken and egg thing, that if we don't have the money, if we can't find the money to pay the higher salary in order to attract people to the job, then the job doesn't get done. And so we're ending up in a worse place in terms of the risk and in terms of the amount, the project work that's being done at the council because of that.
Yes, I completely agree. It is something we're looking at as leadership team on the officer side around what more can we do. But you're quite right. The budgetary considerations are causing issues at the moment around how do you then fund that, and then what do you then take out of the budget to be able to achieve that if you want to pay more to the staff, because obviously you pay more to all staff, including existing staff, not just the new ones. That would be unfair if you did that. So current focus is around actually reviewing the projects we've got in train to make sure we can kind of achieve, refocusing on those ones that are really important, and then either dropping or delaying the ones that are less important. And that's what we're doing, being considered by overall scrutiny around the council delivery plan, around how we prioritise stuff in there. But yes, fundamentally, longer term, we will have to look at what is the structure we want for the organisation, and how do we get there. But that's a difficult quandary and not something we're going to solve very quickly.
I mean, obviously, make the point, and I know it's a proverbial drop in the water, that we do have a sort of 167K's worth of money that was projected to be spent on staffing that we're not spending. And I wonder whether there is a strategy in place, or whether there should be a strategy in place to identify where we're not spending that staffing money, and how that can then be used in order, as I say, it is a drop. I understand it is a drop in the water, but how that can be used alongside others to help mitigate those issues. I'm not sure there's a question as such in that, more just a point.
I guess to kind of answer the question that wasn't there, I think we did last year carry forward £300,000 of unspent salary budget to look at how we could use that to improve the position for the authority. So we put some money into things like HR, around kind of trying to put some capacity there around improving what we look like in the HR market. So we did some work there. We also done stuff around, not been successful recruitment yet, but looking at a grant post to get more grant funding into the organisation to help the budget position a little bit better. And so again, we get some projects moving forward through that. So we are doing things where we can, but as you appreciate, some of these underspends are one-off in nature, and increasing salaries, changing the employment package is permanent in nature, and you build that medium-term budget to balance. So with my finance hat on, I've got one answer, and my HR hat on, I made the HR team as well, I've got a different answer, and it's a quandary on the resources front about how we achieve that.
And one other entirely unrelated question to that. Noticed that the parking penalty charge notices, we've seen a percentage movement of 20%. Is there a specific reason for that within the service, or is it one of these things that happens and that's it?
Usually there's some link to how many enforcement officers we've got. So sometimes we have vacancy, they do see a bit of a drop in income. But I guess it's also to do with how well people are parking, or how badly people are parking. So we'll add a ticket to a car if it's not parked well. So it is down to I guess behaviour of residents, but also the number of people out in the streets, and where they would always try and target areas that are problems. They're not going out to seek giving people tickets, but they'll target areas that are problems. If they find problems, they'll issue a ticket.
Thank you. A quick question from me on the planning public inquiry expenses line. Obviously, it's not one that you can really properly budget for all the time, although you can, I suppose, maintain it as a risk. Is there any opportunity there, dependent upon the outcome, to potentially recoup some of those costs, or is that a sunk cost essentially in terms of what the council has outlaid so far?
I believe that is a sunk cost. We don't, we have to have the inquiry, and then whatever the result is, we are stuck with that cost.
Are there any further questions from the committee on this report? If not, the recommendations are that Finance, Audit and Risk Committee recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet note this report, that Cabinet approves the adjustments to the 2023-24 General Fund budget as identified in Table 3 and paragraph 8.2, a £450,000 decrease in net expenditure, that Cabinet notes the changes to the 2024-25 General Fund budget as identified in Table 3 and paragraph 8.2, a total £769,000 increase in net expenditure. These will be incorporated in the draft revenue budget for 2024-25. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Hone, thank you. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Tandy, thank you. We'll move on to debate. No debate, in which case, can we please move to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item 9, second quarter investment strategy, capital and treasury review 2023-24. Ian Cooper to present.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is the standard format of the report. So this is quarter 2, and this goes again asking Finance Audit and Risk Committee, although pointing to improve the recommendations on this one, to comment on the report in advance of going to Cabinet. So whilst all the recommendations 2.1 to 2.4, 2.5 even, are focused on Cabinet, it's down to this committee to provide any comments to Cabinet in advance of them considering this item when it comes to them in January. The structure of the report is that it starts off with looking at the forecast capital budget, which is in table 1, and then any movements against that, which are broken down between table 2, where we've got slippage in capital spend between this year and next year. You'll note the item in there. And then we've got table 3, which is where we've got projects that are existing projects where we are spending money against them, but where that forecast has changed from what we previously forecast. There's some quite big movements in there, albeit they're kind of different reasons for each of them. So we've got the Local Authority Housing Fund Phase 2, which is announced by government as another tranche of that money. So that project will be fully funded by that grant. So the 1.4 million seems like quite a big number to be added to the capital programme, but actually it's fully funded by grants. So therefore the net impact on the authority is 0 in financial terms. And whilst there has been work for officers to coordinate that, all the actual building work is being undertaken by our registered providers on our behalf. So they're busy trying to achieve that. And on update on phase 1, we've now got confirmation from Settle that all 3 properties in phase 1 are now been occupied. So we will now look at what they've spent and how that tallies with the grants, and sort of confirm the payment to them, and also net position with the government in terms of how much the grant they've used. They actually didn't use all the grant, so we have to return some of the grant, but they have to live with those 3 properties, which is quite good news. And then in table 4, we've got the position on the capital programme and around how it's being funded. It's likely actually that figure on forecast additions to capital receipts is probably overstated. As I've mentioned previously, issues in the estate team around kind of recruitment and retention of those posts, which means that they haven't actually been able to update those numbers for this quarter. So we'll get an update from them as soon as we can on the forecast in terms of surplus land being sold, surplus buildings being sold, and that number there, but it will come down from that number. So we will still be in a situation whereby we'll have a positive capital receipts balance at the end of the year, but it'll be lower than that number there. The land and buildings are still there to be sold, which has been delayed by the resourcing issues. Also want to flag that one emerging, and there might be others that merge between now and Cabinet, because we have got quite a gap between Cabinet, this meeting now, and Cabinet consider support in January. We have got a overspend on the replacement of CCTV cameras across the district. So we brought a report to Cabinet and out to capital programme a while back. Lots of work been going on around looking at those cameras. There will be an overspend against that. So we're going to Cabinet in January to seek approval to continue that project. It's just above the 20% threshold in that project. A lot of the overspend is coming from a combination of factors, including just inflation on prices, but also we are looking at how we can reduce our revenue costs by improving the links between cameras. So if you can link between cameras, it avoids a telecoms link to that camera, which saves you ongoing revenue costs because they can talk to each other and send the signal via 1 wire rather than 2. So that's increased the capital cost, but decreases your ongoing costs, which is good in the longer term. We then move on to the treasury position. As set out in the paragraph in the table 8.11, we've got a good mix of investments across the sort of 4 categories. And as you'll see in table in 8.12, returns are at least 4%, and actually current returns are in excess of 5%. We did a deal with a local authority the other day, and the last time I did a deal with that authority, we were looking at a 0.05% return. We're now looking in excess of around 5.5%, which shows you how in the last 3 years rates have moved. And we're still looking at sort of 5.5% plus for current deals on Treasury. So that's why we're kind of generating such high returns on those at the moment. The table there lists out all the various institutions we're invested with, and I'm happy with all of those in terms of they're complying with the Treasury strategy. This report will go to Cabinet next. We'll refer it on to Council as well, because we are required under the Constitution to report the mid-year position on Treasury onto full Council. That is the end of my introduction. Again, lots of detail in there, so I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Plater.
Yeah, thanks. Just to confirm, you did say that some of those figures in the table you were talking about are not currently up to date within this quarter or on this report?
Yeah, so there's one figure in table 4 in paragraph 8.6, which is the 9.579 million figure, which has not been refreshed since quarter 1. I think there has been some delays in disposal of surplus land and buildings, and therefore that figure will come down. Because we're in a position whereby we have enough capital receipts to fund our capital programme, and will not go below that and not have to use borrowing to fund the capital programme, I'm not concerned about that. If we're in a position in a year or two's time when we weren't in that position, I would be a lot more concerned about it. So it's not ideal, but it's manageable in the situation we're in terms of that figure there. And I did just highlight the CCTV figure in relation to that we got the quotes literally the other day, and so therefore, since the report's been written, into the Cabinet version of the report. So yes, I'm sort of updating you on what's happened, and then that one issue around the fact we haven't had that figure updated in table 4.
That's fine. So if we note this report today, the version of the report that we note will be slightly different than the one that will end up going to Cabinet because of those instances.
I mean, usually we're talking about a week in the difference between the FAR meeting and the Cabinet meeting, but trying to avoid Christmas and all the various meetings, it means that this meeting is pre-Christmas and the Cabinet meeting is mid-January, and therefore it does give me a month gap in between the meetings. So where there are things that I know there are issues in between, I will look at adjusting the report in between here and then.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the £4 million of unspent capital to date on there, which is interesting. How much of that do you think is because of manpower availability?
The two biggest items in there are not directly linked to sort of manpower availability. So we've got the museum and commercial storage, which is where we are looking at the cost of that. The costs of that are coming in quite high. So looking at what other options might be in there. It's not through lack of progress in terms of getting those quotes and knowing what the potential cost of that project is going to be. So that's the reason for that sort of slippage into next year. We'll review our options. And Job Bugger Place is money to give to Settle, which is £1 million of that total, for the redevelopment of John Barker Place. They were affected by a contractor going out of business, and therefore they've had to re-procure that work. And until they've completed phase 2 of that, that's the contingent point at which you pay the money over to them. I admit that some of the others probably are here. The lower numbers in there, some of them will be down to sort of capacity to deliver the projects, particularly the property services ones around the sort of resurfacing of car parks. But again, we've assessed the risk of not doing those works at this time, and actually there is little risk there in terms of condition of those car parks is still good, and therefore actually by doing the works a bit later means you actually have a useful life of the car park for longer before you have to do it all over again, because resurfacing is a cyclical thing.
Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, I'm concerned by sort of the number of references to projects not proceeding because they are not yet urgent, and what that means in terms of the general maintenance of the estate, that things are being deferred simply because they are not urgent. And that doesn't seem like a sensible way to be managing things. Can you just sort of comment on that? Or maybe it's just I'm seeing this out of context. I appreciate this is the list of projects that were due to start in the current cycle have been deferred.
Yeah, it's probably slightly unfortunate language there. I think they're not a priority. I think urgent makes it sound a bit more dramatic than it really is. So it's not like they're going to suddenly become urgent. We've assessed the state of all of those, and they are work's not required at the moment. We could do the work, but as I said, we could do the work now. It would just be a short period where it needs to be done again in a lot of those cases. So I think it is sensible to delay the work in those cases. We've reviewed what the implications of that are. But yeah, there are capacity issues in property services around delivering some of this work, but it is manageable. One of the main reasons for that is around our compliance contractor in property services has given them notice to terminate the contract. So now we've put a lot of work into getting a new contractor to do that work for us. So that's the focus about that, which is the regular day-to-day, month-to-month checks on buildings. If they don't happen, we are at risk of kind of having buildings that are unsafe. These are not areas that will be unsafe. They're just cyclical works. If we delay them a bit, we've assessed there won't be an issue there. So I think it's the word urgent where we should be maybe change something different, but I'm happy with kind of managing risk there.
Thank you, Ian. Just one from me on this. I suppose it's thinking about some of those delayed projects at the moment, and obviously given that we're still in a period where inflation is relatively sort of above the baseline, is there an understood risk around any extra costs that might be incurred by some of those delays in terms of rise in materials and things, or is it at the moment not seen to be too problematic?
Yes, there's a risk there. It's difficult to quantify. At the moment, we seem to have a lot of difficulty in getting contractors wanting to do work for us. That may change in the future, which means price might start to come, at least stabilize or even come down a bit. I guess on the flip side of that money we're not spending is currently generating 5% return in terms of treasury investment. So it's going up. The capacity there is going up. So it's that balance between how much the cost is going to go up versus how much your income going to go up because you've got more money you've invested and got returns on. So a difficult equation, not a perfect answer on, but I just say there's a risk there, but there is kind of a sort of a known kind of balance around what's going on.
And just in terms of, I think the table in 8.12, obviously there are a number of other local authorities that are the subject to some of those investments. Obviously, at the moment, given the state of finances within local government that we're all very aware of, has there been any consideration about the potential rise in the risk of defaulting there with the authorities that we engage with, and whether that might change the strategy going forward?
I think it's first of all important to say that an authority that issues a Section 114 notice or is at risk of issuing a Section 114 notice has not run out of cash. They are not bankrupt, despite what the reports and media will tell you. They, in all cases where authorities have gone into a Section 114 notice territory, they have repaid their treasury investments to where they've been borrowed from other local authorities. Having said that, we're aware of the optics about investing in certain other local authorities, and therefore we do bear that in mind in looking at the places we do invest for our local authorities. We do look at a list of those that are at more risk and consider carefully whether to invest those authorities. Particularly, there might be a broadly equivalent return for an authority that is not in that situation. So that's kind of me saying, yes, we do bear it in mind, but there is still the same overall risk really in that market in terms of, local authorities do pay back their treasury investments when they borrow money from other local authorities.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, Ian. So, can't see any more questions. So the recommendations that Finance, Audit and Risk Committee recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet notes the forecast expenditure of £8.185 million in 2023-24 on the capital programme, paragraph 8.3 refers, that Cabinet approves the adjustments to the capital programme for 2023-24 onwards as a result of the revised timetable of schemes detailed in Table 2 and 3, increasing the overall estimated spend in 2024-25 and beyond by £3.898 million. That Cabinet notes the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed in Table 4, paragraph 8.6, and the requirement to keep the capital programme under review for affordability. That Cabinet recommends to Council that it notes the position of Treasury management activity as at the end of September 2023, including the new capital items. That Cabinet recommends to Council that it confirms the addition of the Local Authority Housing Fund Phase 2 to the capital programme for 2023-24 and approves the reprofiling of Bancroft and Priory splash pads from 2024-25 into 2023-24. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Thomas, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Hone, thank you. Move on to debate. Councillor Plater. Slight issue with the system here.
Thanks, Chair. Although the service director has said the reasons and the mitigations behind some of the discrepancies in some of the numbers on the table, from a governance point of view on this committee, it does worry me slightly that we're being asked to note and send a report to Cabinet where those discrepancies occur. Obviously, in this time round, we've heard the reasons why and the mitigations and the fact that we're on a slightly longer cycle to Cabinet, so those can be addressed before it goes to Cabinet. So I don't see an issue this time round with noting the report, but it would worry me that if we were on a shorter timescale, that we'd be noting a report with discrepancies to go to Cabinet. Not an issue this time round, but something I'd just like to out there for future thought. Thank you.
Yes, I think obviously in this case, I think it's only one number that's been raised. So obviously it's limited, but I do accept the point there that for where we'll be putting stuff across, say for recommendation in terms of then going for acceptance, clearly it would be worth probably amending the recommendations to take account of that. I suppose a risk management from our side on that front, but yeah, I think it's accepted. Any further debate from the committee? If not, can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Item 10, Draft Budget 2024-25. Ian Cooper to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first version of the budget report in preparation for getting to the approval of the final budget going to Council at the end of February. This reflects mainly on the budget workshops we held with all members in the beginning of November, split between the administration group and the Conservative group. And looking feeding back from those meetings around the feedback from those proposals. We have got probably some more emerging proposals that might have to be fed into the Cabinet report, which aren't in the support. But again, given the time gap, things will emerge in budget terms over the cycle as we go from the start of the process all the way up to almost the Council meeting in February. So a couple of areas we're looking at is the Customer Service Centre opening times and the budget implications of that, looking at whether that should be open for a longer period if we're out next year, and the factoring a budget increase for that 1 year. And also, given this where we are with the economic development strategies, probably an ongoing cost for that for another year whilst we consider that going forward. So a couple more things to sort of feed into the report, probably in time for the cabinet version, in terms of things on top of what was considered the budget workshops. The other bit to update you on primarily from the report is whilst we have had the autumn statement, we've now had a policy statement from Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities in relation to the local government settlements. We still haven't had the actual draft settlement yet. That is due imminently, probably maybe tomorrow. It depends when they find time in the House of Commons timetable before they rise for Christmas, their Christmas recess. So at some point in the next few days, we might get that. The policy statement, I guess, was trying to give us reassurance. That was issued about a week or so ago around what we contain within that. In essence, I think it's in line with what we're assuming in the medium-term financial strategy. So it included a 3% guarantee in terms of our core spending power, which is taking basically our income from detained business rates, new homes bonus, council tax and other grants, and looking at what that was last year, and then saying it'll be at least 3% more going to this year, which I guess is welcome in terms of it's an increase, still not tracking quite at inflation, but it is an increase nonetheless. The other bit confirmed in there was that there would be a 3% referendum limit for council tax. So that will be the recommendation to cabinet initially, and then on to council, that we do increase council tax by essentially 2.99%, so below the limit, but near enough 3% in terms of ensuring that the viability of our services continue going forward. Beyond that, not much as would be expected around any more medium-term implications for our funding. That would have come out of the autumn statements if it was going to be anything, but we are not at a point yet where government, given the elections in national elections coming up, etc., we're not at a point where we're going to get any kind of certainty going forward on that. Just hope that once we are post-election, that we will get at some point some more funding certainty going forward over that then period of that Parliament, given we don't have any funding certainty beyond at most 2 years for lots and lots of years now. So that's where we are in terms of funding and the various proposals from the budget workshops. So that's going to go through to cabinet to then consider that, and then the more detailed report will come to this committee at the end of January, and then cabinet beginning of February, and then council end of February, which will have all the usual detail around the funding assumptions, risk assumptions, what my recommendation on minimum general fund balance should be, the risks inherent in that budget, and all the other factors that go into setting a structured budget for next year that we think is reasonable. There will be a use of reserves in that budget, just in the fact that our funding position is such that is required, but that currently is coming out of the business rates reserve, where we've taken our pooling gains from previous years. We've been part of a business rate pool and put it into reserve. So we're using those in the short term for that period to balance the budget. There will be savings to be achieved in later years, but at the moment we can manage through that process as it stands. So yeah, that's where we are currently. If there, as sort of observed, there will be an update in terms of an addenda report for cabinet to reflect the actual outcome of the local government settlement. There were some real numbers in there then. I can imagine they'll be in line with what sort of got my assumptions already, but we'll do an addendum. If that had come out today, I'd have tried to an addendum, or at least kind of give me more detail out today, but it's not, the timing hasn't quite worked out at this time. Sometimes it does for this committee at this time of year. We do get some late updates, but yeah, that will go into the cabinet version of the report. So just to sort of flag again that they'll get a slightly different version of the report.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any questions from the committee? John Cannon.
Thanks, Jed. Appreciate it's a draft budget for further consideration. I just wonder, drawing a link between some of the growth that it outlines around new roles that are hard to fill, etc., some of these things will coincide with the savings schedule coming up over the next few years. I just wonder, is this proposal raising the budget baseline only to try and undo it in 3 years' time? Is it a stop-start scenario?
No, I think all the areas where the principal area we've got growth in there at the moment is on planning, and that's linked to the needs to deliver all the major sites and the income that will flow through from those. So no, in that respect, in terms of that area, we will need that staff in place to be able to deliver those big planning applications that will be coming to us in later years. There obviously are some other pressures in there that are ongoing. For example, the top one on the revenue side is in relation to Careline, but Careline is growing, is generating more income, both through the work it does on behalf of the county council, as well as its kind of other client base in terms of individual users of Careline. So I think the answer broadly in terms of those ones that are ongoing, they're either related to planning or to Careline, and therefore I don't see it as kind of creating issues you need to undo. There obviously are shorter term investments in there in terms of increased costs, but obviously they will be naturally undone because they're only short term in the first place.
Councillor Hone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, noticing here that there's a number of consultants coming in and support on a variety of jobs and tasks. Significant number, in fact, of some for extended periods and some for relatively short periods. I use the example of a short period being the election ones, but some others in there which are extended periods. Is this again reflective of our need to hire different people, or is it reflective of the fact that these are specialist one-off tasks where we need to bring in expertise which we don't have in-house?
Yes, it's generally where we need expertise, sometimes over a longer period. So notice that, for example, R18 does look a long period of a specialist, but I think there's a series of specialists in there of different ones at quite different times. So therefore, whilst it's sort of 60,000 each year on for that 5-year period, those aren't the same specialists each year. It's different ones at different times, and therefore it's more effective to buy them in as we need them rather than getting that post established or those posts established. That will cost a lot more. So yeah, in general, it's because we need that specialist input for short periods of time, and it's therefore not worth getting in a member of staff in to do that kind of work.
No worries. Any further questions from the committee? Okay. In which case, the recommendations that Finance, Audit and Risk Committee recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet note the latest funding forecasts for 2024-25 onwards and the significant uncertainty that still remains. That Cabinet confirm that it will be necessary to increase council tax by the maximum amount allowed without a local referendum, as this is what will be assumed by government in determining the business rates that the council can retain and calculating the council's core spending power. That Cabinet note the comments made at the budget workshops and comment on the inclusion of the revenue savings and investments in the budget to be brought back for consideration in February for referral onto council at the end of February. That council notes the comments made at the budget workshops and comment on the inclusion of the capital investments in the investment strategy to be brought back for consideration in February for referral onto council at the end of February. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Plater, thank you. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Thomas, thank you. Move on to the debate. Is there any debate from the committee? Nope. Okay. In which case, can we please move on to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 11, possible agenda items for future meetings. So as we've had at previous meetings, this is an opportunity for any committee members to raise any items that they'd like to see brought forward at future meetings. Anything reflective of the role that the FAR committee plays that we could raise here and discuss, potentially for moving on then to recommendations for cabinet or for council if it was so felt. But yeah, this is open to the floor for any ideas. Councillor Plater.
Yeah, I know it's been mentioned a few times tonight. I wonder whether there's something around the risks for recruitment and retention that could be, that we're currently working on, that could be presented here, and a discussion around those risks and where we are most at risk at the moment as a separate topic.
Ian? Yeah.
It is a risk. It's already a project and a risk in the council delivery plan. So that is already being fed through to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The Joint Staff Consultative Committee, who have an HR focus, already do pay an interest in it as well. So I get your interest, but I just feel there's probably some duplication there if we then pick up that as an audit committee as well.
I suppose as a balance between that, would it be possible for a kind of, I suppose, an idea of what the work streams underway elsewhere are, maybe in a little bit more detail, maybe not a full kind of go through and run through, but at least, so I suppose, some more detail behind the, in terms of the risks set out here, some of the actions against it, maybe just to cover off next time, if possible.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I can also share something, sort of stuff we've already produced for various reports, etc., offline outside the committee. And then if you then want to sort of have a more wider discussion at this group, then we can do as well. But if that sort of helps answer the question without coming back to you to have a report on it, then that might be sufficient. So I'll send something around offline first, and then we'll see where we go after that.
Thank you, Ian. I think that would definitely help in terms of some of the discussions we've had both at this committee and in previous occasions as well. Any other ideas from the floor at all? If not, sorry.
I was just going to sort of talk about, if it's okay, around the sort of training sessions as well, and sort of where we're going in for some of those. So when we come to the March meeting, which I appreciate I'm jumping quite a bit ahead here, we will set the internal audit plan for next year, which is the focus of the internal audit service. We'll have an update on internal audit next time as well, in terms of where we are with the current year's audit plan. As a member of the board of the SIAS, the Shared Internal Audit Service, we were having quite in-depth discussions, as all local authorities are part of that, and SIAS themselves, around what future audit looks like, what more modern internal audit looks like. So in light of that, I think it'd be helpful next time, probably before the meeting, to have a training session around internal audit and what the future of that looks like. That's going to be coupled with a discussion internally as officers around how we better engage officers in internal audit. It's a really important function. It's a really good piece of governance to have a good internal audit function. So if I could do that next time as part of the training before the meeting, because then you've got time to think about it in advance of both the update from Chris Wood as your chief internal auditor at the meeting next time, and the March meeting where we set the internal audit plan for the year after. And then I'll happily pick up the bit around the risk training maybe at the March meeting, if that works for everyone.
Sounds a very sensible way forward. I don't know if there's any comments from committee at all, or if everyone's fairly happy with that. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, Ian. In which case then, close out item 11 there. So that concludes the meeting. The next meeting of FAR is currently scheduled for Wednesday, the 31st of January, 2024. So with that, I believe this is the last council session of the year. So go off, enjoy your time off, and lovely to see you all refreshed and ready to go again in 2024. I'll close the meeting now at 21:05. Thank you all.